the notion that it is acceptable for a third of our youngsters to be told they've failed at the age of 16 is something that I can't find a teacher that agrees that that's the right way to go. Teachers want children to achieve well, they want high standards, but they also want to see pathways that give all children opportunities to demonstrate success. When I was studying Learning Without Limits, we developed this notion of what we called co-agency. So agency of the teacher, but also agency of the child or the young person, the students, because when you've got that, you can go anywhere.
Okay, so my guest today has spent her career proving that if we trust teachers and we believe in every child's potential, great things can happen. So Dame Alison Peacock is the Chief Executive of the Chartered College of Teaching, and in my mind, one of the most influential people in education today, and has a strong voice in this world that we are all learning to navigate. So her work around Learning Without Limits really challenged the idea around fixed ability, showing inclusive and creative teaching, and unlocking success for all learners. And I feel now absolutely champions teacher agency, research-informed practice, and really a deep commitment around equity for all young people. And so I really wanted to talk to Alison today around the fact that inclusion isn't a value, it's a practice. And if we trust and support our teachers, it will be a great vehicle for change, and we will see a huge difference in education. So Alison, welcome to our first Cross-Sector Lab podcast.
Thank you very much. I'm really pleased to be with you today. Looking forward to our conversation.
Brilliant. So I have a few questions to keep us on track, because it's such an explorative area, really around teacher agency and then kind of inclusive pedagogy. So my first question is around how do we dismantle the kind of limiting labels in education that often track disadvantaged learners in our classrooms?
Oh my goodness, a nice easy one to start off with. So the limiting labels that we place on children, that we place on ourselves, that parents also place on children, are very much a part of English society. So within this society, we are quite keen on ranking people. We're known for liking cues. There's a reason for liking cues. It's because everybody knows where they are. So we are quite comfortable with ranking people and labeling people. And we have a whole set of terminology in our language that is designed to maintain that. So it's things like, do you know who you are? The kind of where do you think you come from? All those kind of phrases that imply that you should know your level and you should stay within your lane and you shouldn't get above yourself. And these are very problematic. And if the teacher is imbued with these views of deterministic views of children have their place and they should stay within their place, and they believe that a child is not very capable in a particular way, then the chances are they won't provide them with work that gives them the opportunity to show that that's not the case. They won't challenge any sort of misconceptions in that area. And so then we have children who potentially are never given the chance that they deserve to have. And we also have parents who think like this as well, Melissa. This is another concern. So one of the things that I would do as a head teacher would be to invite children and their teachers and their parents to come and talk about their learning. And the children they'd prepare a PowerPoint demonstration and they'd talk about what they've been doing. Sometimes we'd have parents in the conversation who would be trying to diminish the child's success. We'd sometimes have parents who'd be saying things like, well, you didn't do that on your own, did you? Or these kinds of things, which is quite difficult to believe, but that is the case. So we have a lot to counter. This notion of moving beyond labels is huge. And as we may well come on to, the incentive to label your child has become exacerbated by government policy.
Absolutely. As previous head teacher quite recently, especially in the SEN sector, you saw that absolute rings true to what you've just said around, especially in an annual review or those end of term meetings, and that parent struggling also to look at how their young person is flourishing and accepting that, and then also being a driver along with the teacher. I think it really has changed a lot, especially over the last decade. Definitely I've seen that in practice. I mean, one of the things you were just talking around then around those labels, I'm wondering, is there something also around teachers' professional identity and that loss of agency, because they also fall into that space? I know you've been doing a lot of work with the Chartered College around learners seeing themselves in the workforce. Do you think there is something around professional identity that we also park into boxes or label?
Well, absolutely. I mean, the reason that I lead the Chartered College is for exactly that reason. I think that our profession is so important to the future of our children, and we need teachers who can think for themselves, and we need teachers who are able to collaborate and connect in communities and to broaden horizons and to engage with new ideas. And if we have a workforce that thinks that teaching and learning is all sorted and all you need to do is press the PowerPoint slide onto the next slide and the children will all sit there silently and the work will all be done neatly in the books. I mean, I just, it's not the teaching that I know. The teaching that I know is about trying to bring learning to life. And of course, if you've got resources that have been centrally collated that are helpful, then brilliant. But using that as the only way of communicating with the children limits what's possible in the classroom. So we need our teachers to have that sense of agency, of purpose, to be ready to ask the left field question, to actually be able to respond if something suddenly happens that nobody was anticipating, like it starts snowing. The idea that you just carry on with your lesson and you forget the huge excitement that is brewing in your classroom because the snow is falling or whatever it might be. It's really important that as teachers we establish that relationship with our classes and that we work together. And when I was studying Learning Without Limits, we developed this notion of what we called co-agency. So agency of the teacher, but also agency of the child or the young person, the students, because when you've got that, you can go anywhere. If you've got your class of youngsters or your group of youngsters, or even your individual student that you may be tutoring, and together you both have a sense of agency around purpose, making meaning out of the learning, then anything feels possible. And that's amazing when that happens.
I think that loss of explorative learning is here. I remember doing lesson observations as a head and trying to help teachers feel take risk in what you are doing. The idea around learning without limits. Is there something around a practical framework for schools who are facing social inequality? And we listen a lot around what is inclusion, and I'm sure you've had my thoughts around that I don't think inclusion is the right word. I think equity is what we should be looking at, because inclusion immediately makes us think of a barrier rather than equity making us think about what are our barriers that we are putting upon. So I wonder, is there something around that learning without limits and a framework around social equality?
Well, I think work that I did around learning without limits is all about finding a way through. It's all about finding a way through for every learner. And that's not only the children, that's also the teachers. So one of the things that, when I was referring to those student conferences earlier on, those conferences where I would be there, the teacher would be there, the child would be there, the parents, there was also something around building a kind of sense of possibility, which also was role modeling for teachers. And I don't think it's not so simple as just a framework. It's about a way of thinking, and it's about a way of working, and it's about embodying a vision, and as you say, an equitable vision, because it's not about all children having the same entitlement. It's about children being given the roots they need to be able to flourish and to be able to be successful. And they're not always going to be the same ingredients, if you like, that are going to need to be there. And it's hard. it's not something that you can implement and then walk away and say, well, that's that, then that's done. It's not, because it's as I was saying before, some of these issues are really deeply held within our society. And so if we're going to help our teachers really and truly to think differently about what might be possible in their classrooms, we're going to need to give them help with that and provide mentorship and provide opportunities to see what might be possible. So I think it's so important and it's so worthwhile. And I think since I was researching this work, which was back in the sort of 2000s, 2010, there's another lens with which I would also wish to sort of look at learning without limits. And that is also around the lens of the global majority and making sure that we are not just treating everybody as if they're all the same, because people have different challenges and different backgrounds and different prejudices against them. And those prejudices come whether you're a child from a traveller community, whether you might be a child from a refugee family. All kinds of differences also impact on children's capacity to learn, capacity to view themselves as efficacious learners within the classroom. So there is so much that as teachers, we have a responsibility to address and to be open about. And I don't see this as a burden at all. I think the more that we can encourage openness as a disposition amongst our staff, the greater chance there is that we will achieve amazing things with both staff working together, but also with children as well. Because children can absolutely sense. Children are, they always talk about it's got to be fair. They have a real sense of what's right and wrong and what's fair. And one of the things they can sense about you is if you are open, if you're open to listening, if you're open to ideas, if you're open to being able to hear their point of view and listen to that and to take account of it. That's a really important quality in a teacher. I think it's so underestimated. And once you've got that and you can encourage that and nurture that, if you've got a staff team that really value openness, then actually you're ready to debate things. I mean, pedagogy is not something that is that you can write on the back of a postage stamp, is it? It's it's a way of thinking, a way of learning, a way of being, and it's open constantly. If you've got that kind of environment, open to new possibilities.
The agility around it, which is where I kind of wanted to look at that. It's how do we start that preparation, I suppose. But I remember when I did my degree, we had a module on philosophy of education, and then we had one on pedagogical. Bloom's taxonomy is still there, and now we hear often the conversation around Maslow before Bloom, and making sure, which I really firmly believe in. I think that's, as you just described, the Maslow principle, so to speak, of offering safety, a space, and an understanding of reciprocating a conversation and not having to feel brave to talk to your teacher, but actually feeling safe, and it's okay to have this dialogue before we can really look at the kind of Bloom side of even how do we look at that kind of teaching. I mean, do you think there is hope and encouragement in how we can support a system which I think at the moment feels very risk adverse right now, but also very compliance driven? Sorry to use the word. But do you think there is hope that we can renegotiate what good quality teaching and educational experiences could look like for both the workforce and the young person?
There has to be. We have to get this right, and I think it is a constant quest, because for all that people would like everything to be easy to navigate, and therefore we don't have to question anything and we just do it and it's fine and then we go home. The reality is, when you're working with individual human beings, they're complex, and teachers are complex, and we're all different. Thank goodness, and thank goodness that children are different. And although there will be some strategies that will work for the majority, there are always going to be those children for whom things don't work. And we need to have the capacity to be able to think differently and use creativity to kind of imagine, well, what might be the way that I'm going to enable this child to be able to engage with this learning? What could I think about? What could I do? How could I present it in a way that is going to be irresistible to them? And I think the professional skill that that requires is, it would be terrible if that was lost. We need our professionals to be able to pull on a whole repertoire of strategies and ideas and approaches that work within the classroom. So it's no good just applying a recipe. We need that repertoire approach, to paraphrase Robin Alexander. It's really important that, therefore, that teachers extend their knowledge, that they talk to each other, that they have windows into classrooms, that they see what's happening elsewhere, that they hear about things that work. And teachers are very good at sort of magpieing ideas. You've only got to go and visit schools anywhere in the country. You'll go and visit school and you'll see a display somewhere and you think, oh, I've seen that display before. I saw it in Portsmouth and I'm now in Newcastle. And it's because teachers just they just find great strategies for doing things and they apply them. So the same is true in terms of ways of working in the classroom. And I think it goes way beyond just taking the lesson plan and delivering the script. It goes way beyond that. And the best teachers are very charismatic, which doesn't mean that you have to be charismatic to be an effective teacher, but you do need to be able to have the confidence to connect with the children. And because the children aren't an amorphous being, the children are made up of 31 plus little wriggly individuals, and they've all got different interests and things that excite them and so on. If you know about that, if you can connect with those children because you value them as people, you're going to be a much better teacher.
So this is an interesting year around changes in education. What opportunities and risks or do you see around advancing equity in learners, especially learners affected by poverty and the poverties we're really trying to focus on as a charity are the societal, political, cultural poverties, of course, cognitive and economic, but really thinking about the as you say, the global majority. What does that look like, and how within the UK especially, how are we going to, with this landscape that potentially is going to shift through the policy changes, how do we navigate that? Can you see there are possibilities there?
So we await the outcomes of the curriculum and assessment review, clearly. We've also got the government white paper where they're looking at how we support children with additional needs, for example. So there are some policy things on the landscape that could make a big difference. I think the notion that it is acceptable for a third of our youngsters to be told they've failed at the age of 16 is something that I can't find a teacher that agrees that that's the right way to go. Teachers want children to achieve well, they want high standards, but they also want to see pathways that give all children opportunities to demonstrate success. And we need a broader definition of what educational success is. So yes, of course, there are the academic routes, they're very well trodden, we know about those, but we also need to make sure that we value a wider set of skills and attributes. And we need to give teachers the freedom, I think, if they feel they haven't got it already, to work in a more interdisciplinary way. So to give children, for example, Key Stage 3 is a real kind of, there's an opportunity there for some brilliant interdisciplinary working with meaningful open-ended tasks where children can bring different skills and they can use the power of oracy to express their ideas and so on. Those kinds of things are much more amenable to a much broader group of children than constantly privileging written tasks and written outcomes in an exam hall. So I know that what you're doing at ASDAN is really trying to build meaningful pathways for that wider community. It's so important. I can't emphasize how frustrating it is when I hear about children joining secondary school and being told that they've got to revisit what they've already done in primary school, or even worse, being put on a so-called flight path, and that flight path has got them crashing and burning at what motivation is there to actually do anything if it says, by the way, you're not going to get your GCSEs. Well, thank you very much. I'm only 11. So we need to do something about that. And I do hope that, I mean, Becky Francis, when she she started implementing the curriculum and assessment review, she said that children with additional needs and children from underserved communities were going to be very much in her sights. I can't see how you can reform the curriculum and reform the assessment system without providing those pathways, additional pathways for young people. So I'm very hopeful of that as a way forward. I think with special educational needs, we need to get beyond the debate about who pays for support, which is, I mean, it's a massive political tussle, this, but we need to get beyond that to be thinking about how do we help teachers to be the best teachers of every child that they can be? How do we help teachers to embrace learning for all in a genuine way? And that is I mean, I don't know teachers who don't want to do that. Teachers want to do the right thing for their children, and they don't want to see children frustrated and not able to complete tasks. They want them to be able to engage meaningfully with learning. So I feel as if there's a lot to win. And of course, because I lead the Chartered College of Teaching, I would say this, but teacher agency, teacher knowledge, teacher expertise, these are all things that are foundational for the future of our workforce, the future of our economy, but really crucially for the quality and flourishing of what it means to be a young person. We need our young people to be happy, fulfilled, excited to go to school, excited to go to college, wanting to contribute. We need all of that, and we're not going to get it if we just constantly tell them they've failed.
Say that the teachers and the agency there is, if a car manufacturer develops a new car, they ask the engineers who are building the car all the way through, don't they? And I think it's something we really miss in education still, is going into that deeper dive around the kind of those that are working at the chalk face, that kind of traditional statement. I always used to learn when we were looking at evolving our curriculum and the pedagogy across a school setting with the mixed cohorts that would often come through the front door, that actually the amount of teachers would say, well, I've learned from, and it was the young people they were talking about. I learned from teaching Sam, actually this is a better way, and I know it will work for Fred, Sarah and Katie. And just that the feedback that you can get from those that are working so well and giving them that voice back, I think is going to be really key. It's how that journey happens and what happens to those young people today, and for that future generation that are coming through. It's a complex picture, isn't it? But I agree with you. I think it's something we can absolutely, there is a vehicle for change.
Yeah, and I think that the reality is that we've got a young workforce that is risk averse, as you've said before. And it's not just that they're risk averse, they perhaps haven't experienced themselves as learners what it's like to be in a classroom where the art of the possible is at the heart of teaching. It may be that they've been successful because they've come through the system and they've then been able to apply to come into teacher training, and they're now delivering interesting terminology lessons in the way that they've been taught themselves. And I think it wouldn't take much, though, and I think Ofsted has a role to play in this, releasing the shackles a little bit, and which means that leaders in schools would be able to release the shackles a little bit, would mean that actually I think teachers quite quickly would begin to see things that they could tell were making a difference in their classrooms. And by the way, I'm not talking here about making everything fun. Fun is a very low level concept, really. Things that are fun very quickly get boring. What's really compelling in a classroom is giving children enough challenge, so that they have enough challenge where they feel it's within reach, and then when they manage to achieve something, then there's a real sense of thrill about that, because they've been able to do more than they thought they could. So that sense of challenging yourself, trying to do better, and it's not about a racetrack, it's about my personal best. What can I do that my friend might be able to do in a different way, but what can I do that is more successful this week than it was 3 weeks ago? And can I celebrate that? And will somebody notice that? And that's where things like potential for portfolios and skills builder kind of approaches are really helpful, because they help children to track their progress, but not only the children, also others around them and within their community. So again, it's not about who can run the fastest, but it is about progress, and progress in a way that is owned by the child. That's very different from the kind of progress that is printed out on the data sheet.
I was going to say, as you were talking through, it's that ownership of my own learning is so important. And isn't that what we want from our workforces when we employ them as well?
Well,
And
completely. It's what employers
yeah,
need. They need independent
exactly.
thinkers. They need people who are excited about learning, who want to try the next thing, but also who do that in a collegiate way.
Absolutely. No, that is brilliant. Thank you very much for your time and the conversation. Is there anything else that you would like to say as we bring this piece to an end?
Only to say congratulations on everything that you're doing at ASDAN, and let's hope that together we can really build these additional pathways in a way that is very fulfilling for our children and young people. Hurrah!
Brilliant. Thank you very much.